In this article, they say we hear Miss Peltz summoned a butler to the master bathroom after she discovered drops of urine on the toilet seat. She demanded the butler clean it up, which he did, although she then insisted that he clean the toilet seat again. And again. It was only after he'd cleaned the seat 4 times, one more for luck, she said.
For years, the Beckham family carefully presented an image that felt untouchable. Perfect smiles, perfect unity, a global brand built on success, discipline, and family values. But now, that glossy picture has shattered, and the cracks are impossible to ignore. Right at the center of this storm stands Brooklyn Beckham, his wife Nicola Peltz, and her billionaire father Nelson Peltz, a man insiders say never truly believed Brooklyn was worthy of standing beside his daughter. What once existed as quiet discomfort behind closed doors has now erupted into an all-out family war. Lawyers have stepped in, private messages have turned into legal threats, phones have gone silent, and a divide has formed that many believe may never be repaired. The question everyone is whispering, and some are afraid to ask out loud, is deeply unsettling. Is Brooklyn making these moves on his own, or has he been fully absorbed into the Peltz power circle? Because behind the emotional Instagram posts, the carefully worded statements, and the polished public smiles, there is a ruthless power struggle unfolding, and it's far more serious than a family disagreement. Everything reached a boiling point when Brooklyn publicly turned against his own parents. In a long, emotionally charged social media post, he accused David and Victoria Beckham of controlling narratives, of prioritizing their global brand over their son, and of repeatedly disrespecting Nicola. There were no coded messages, no vague wording, no room for interpretation. Brooklyn left nothing unsaid. He made it painfully clear that his loyalty now lies with Nicola, no matter the cost. What shocked people wasn't just the accusations, it was the finality. No olive branch, no suggestion of reconciliation, no hope of repair. Just a clean, brutal break that left fans, insiders, and even extended family stunned. According to sources close to the Beckhams, that explosive post didn't appear out of nowhere. Something significant happened days earlier. Behind the scenes, David and Victoria reportedly sent a deeply personal letter to their son, not through publicists, not through lawyers, not through social media, directly to him. At that point, all real communication had already collapsed. Insiders say Brooklyn had gone as far as issuing a cease and desist order against his own parents, demanding they stop mentioning him publicly and communicate only through lawyers. That move sent shockwaves through the Beckham family, but what disturbed them even more was the growing belief that Brooklyn wasn't acting alone. Quiet whispers suggested Nicola and her powerful family may have heavily influenced that legal decision. David and Victoria's letter, according to insiders, wasn't angry, it wasn't defensive, it was raw, emotional, and full of fear. They weren't asking for control, they were asking for reassurance. They just wanted to know their son was okay. But instead of healing the situation, the letter seemed to push Brooklyn even further away. Days later came the bombshell, his public takedown. Brooklyn framed it as self-liberation. He denied Nicola had any control over him. In fact, he flipped the narrative entirely, claiming it was his parents who had controlled his life and that he was finally breaking free. But this is where the story becomes deeply complicated, because while Brooklyn insists he's now free, his actions suggest the opposite. Since cutting ties with his parents, every step he's taken has pulled him deeper into the Peltz world. He lives within their orbit, he moves in their social circles, and according to insiders, communication with his parents happens only through intermediaries. That reality has people asking a dangerous question. Is this really about family trauma, or is it a battle for dominance between two powerful dynasties? One moment continues to haunt everyone involved: the wedding. More specifically, the dance. Brooklyn claims his mother, Victoria, interrupted his first dance with Nicola, a moment meant to belong only to them. He says the incident humiliated him publicly and sent Nicola running from the room in tears. Witnesses say the energy in the room shifted instantly. Joy collapsed into tension in seconds. That dance became symbolic of crossed boundaries, wounded pride, and an invisible power struggle. Insiders say that moment marked Nicola's breaking point. After the wedding, her position became firm. Brooklyn was reportedly told he couldn't have both his wife and his mother in his life. The choice was brutal, and Brooklyn chose Nicola. From that moment on, everything unraveled. Invitations declined, family gatherings avoided, communication cut off completely. Sources claim Nicola refuses to attend any event where David and Victoria may be present. Whether that's self-protection or control depends entirely on who you ask. Now, Brooklyn lives almost entirely disconnected from the family that built his name. While Nicola commands the spotlight, the most powerful figure in the shadows remains silent. Her father, Nelson Peltz, a billionaire known for precision, dominance, and control. Reports suggest Nelson has never been impressed by Brooklyn's ventures, photography, cooking, influencing, viewing them as scattered and lacking direction. No public criticism, no open attacks, just quiet disapproval, the kind that carries weight when it comes from a man who controls billions. And then there's the legal reality that raises even more questions. A strict prenuptial agreement signed before the wedding reportedly protects the Peltz fortune completely. If the marriage fails, Brooklyn walks away with nothing beyond what he and Nicola built together. For the Beckhams, this wasn't about money, it was about dependency. If Brooklyn loses this marriage after cutting ties with his parents, he loses everything. No family safety net, no foundation. That fear reportedly keeps David and Victoria awake at night. Still, those close to the Beckhams insist their door remains open. No conditions, no demands, just love. But Brooklyn remains firm. No regrets. He believes he spoke his truth. He believes this was the only way to reclaim his life. Meanwhile, his siblings continue forward, close to their parents, but most crucially, still have a positive relationship with Brooklyn, which says something about the entire system.
Parents, building their futures, carrying the Beckham legacy forward without him. And yet, a surprising voice has now entered the conversation, not from Hollywood, not from high society, but from football. Brooklyn's former youth coach from his QPR days spoke publicly, not to defend or condemn, but to add context. He described a childhood filled with pressure, anxiety, and emotional distance. A teenager living under constant security at just 14 years old. Fame without peace, wealth without safety. He didn't blame anyone directly, but his words painted a picture that left people questioning
Loud and
everything.
clear.
Not quite sure what Brooklyn has accomplished on his own in his life. However, he is determined to destroy the reputation of his mother for some reason. So we're going to find out more details, I'm sure, because he has recently spoken out.
Brooklyn never really had anything close to a normal childhood. From the outside, it looked privileged. From the inside, it was pressure, surveillance, expectations, and a life lived under constant scrutiny. That kind of upbringing doesn't just shape you, it leaves cracks that make someone vulnerable. Vulnerable to pressure, vulnerable to influence, vulnerable to believing that cutting off everything familiar is the only way to finally breathe. And this is where the story turns deeply uncomfortable. Because when you strip away the celebrity drama and emotional headlines, one undeniable truth stands out. Nicola didn't step into Brooklyn's world. Brooklyn stepped into hers. She remained firmly surrounded by her family, protected by generational wealth, backed by power, security, and total financial independence. Meanwhile, Brooklyn walked away from the Beckham dynasty, from his parents, his structure, his history, and his safety net, and tied his entire emotional world to one family alone, the Peltz family. That imbalance is what's making people uneasy, not because Nicola is necessarily manipulative, not because Brooklyn is weak, but because isolation changes dynamics. When one person or one family becomes your only emotional anchor, their influence can quietly become absolute, even when no one is openly controlling anything. And through all this chaos, one figure has remained almost unnervingly silent: Nelson Peltz. No interviews, no denials, no statements, no public defense of his son-in-law, just silence. And when silence comes from someone as strategic and calculated as Nelson Peltz, it's never meaningless. In fact, in this story, it might be the loudest signal of all. Those who've worked around Nelson describe him as disciplined, blunt, and entirely unimpressed by fame or image. Reports suggest he sees Brooklyn as unfocused, a young man still searching for identity, leaning more on his last name than on a clearly defined direction. That perception may not be fair, but in elite circles, perception is reality. And insiders say Nelson's doubts have only deepened as Brooklyn's fallout with his parents dragged on. Because in high-power social and business networks, cutting off your family doesn't look like independence, it looks like instability, and instability is poison in those worlds. Then there's Brooklyn's career, or as critics frame it, his ongoing search for one: photography, cooking, lifestyle branding. Each new venture has drawn massive attention and quiet skepticism, particularly from within the Peltz orbit. David Beckham built his empire through relentless discipline and laser-focused consistency. Brooklyn's path, by contrast, has appeared experimental, inconsistent, and still without firm grounding. This conflict goes far beyond money. It's about values. One family believes in endurance, legacy, and long-term brand control. The other measures worth through dominance, leverage, and results. When those two worlds collided through Brooklyn and Nicola, tension was inevitable. Insiders quietly claim Nelson Peltz has never been convinced Brooklyn brings tangible value, not financially, not strategically, not symbolically. And according to those close to David and Victoria, the shift in their son didn't happen overnight. It crept in, slowly. They say it began when Brooklyn stopped speaking for himself, deferred decisions to others, and allowed lawyers to enter conversations that were once deeply personal. People who know the family insist Brooklyn didn't always sound this way. He didn't always describe his parents as controlling villains. He didn't always act as if he needed to escape. Brooklyn rejects that interpretation completely, but the timing is impossible to ignore. The deeper he settled into his marriage, the further he drifted from the family that raised him. And one of the clearest indicators of how deep this rift truly runs is who hasn't joined the conflict: his siblings. They remain close to their parents. They show up. They support one another. They've built independence without erasing family. That contrast raises the question no one wants to ask out loud. If the Beckham household was as suffocating as Brooklyn claims, why was only one child driven to walk away? Online, Brooklyn has earned praise for standing up for himself. But behind the scenes, insiders say the emotional cost has been devastating. No casual phone calls, no surprise visits, no warmth. Every message filtered, every word measured, every interaction routed through intermediaries. When family communication becomes that controlled, reconciliation stops being difficult and starts becoming nearly impossible. Most celebrity feuds follow a familiar script: explosive fallout, silence, then a tearful reunion that melts hearts. But this one feels different, because it isn't just about hurt feelings, it's about structure, power, influence. Two massive family empires clashing over control. On one side, the Beckhams: discipline, legacy, image. On the other, the Peltzes: dominance, wealth, leverage. And trapped right in the center is Brooklyn, a son caught between two dynasties, two value systems, and one crushing question: what happens if Brooklyn ever changes his mind? Walking away feels empowering when you believe you're right, but coming back requires humility and forgiveness on both sides. Sources insist David and Victoria would take him back instantly. No conditions, no public apologies, just love.
But that warmth may not extend to everyone in his current world. If Brooklyn wanted to reconnect, would Nicola stand by that decision? Would Nelson Peltz allow it? Or has the line already been crossed beyond repair? Right now, two realities exist side by side. The Beckhams moving forward as a tight family unit, and Brooklyn living a new life, appearing unbothered on the surface, yet permanently shadowed by what he left behind. Brooklyn claims he has no regrets. David and Victoria quietly say they'll wait, however long it takes. And through it all, Nicola remains constant, always present, always central. Whether she's fiercely protecting her marriage or subtly shaping the narrative depends on who you ask. But either way, she stands at the heart of Brooklyn's new world. One thing is undeniable. Brooklyn Beckham's life has been permanently altered, and there may never be a clean road back. This story isn't finished, not even close.